First item is item number 7, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Ohio gozaimasu. Good morning, and welcome everyone to Council Chambers for a very important time in our city's history. We are joined this morning by a number of seniors of Japanese heritage, all of whom were impacted by the internment of Japanese Canadians during World War II. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining us, and you and your families. We are honored to have you with us. Last year, UBC honored Japanese Canadians from that era who were never able to complete their degrees because they were forced to leave the city. They were finally awarded their degrees and convocated in a special ceremony with fellow graduates. I know it was an emotional ceremony, moment, and a long time coming. And out of that moment comes this motion, which is the work of many members of the Japanese Canadian community here in Vancouver and across Canada, and we will hear from some of them this morning. The motion before us addresses the actions taken by Vancouver City Council in 1942, many years ago, that allowed the internment to happen and to acknowledge the injustice of that action. It was a widespread policy that the council of the day supported unanimously, and a copy of that original motion has been posted, and in reading it, it is shocking to consider that the language that was used and those actions that were taken in this chamber against members of our community, it was wrong, and we are sorry. Fukaku owabi itashimasu. I will read the motion, which will be in the form of a proclamation, I think, going forward, as a formal apology to the City of Vancouver, for the City of Vancouver's role in the 1942 internment of Japanese Canadians. And whereas the year 2013 marks the 71st year since the War Measures Act was invoked and all residents of Japanese descent were forcibly removed from coastal British Columbia. And whereas the Vancouver City Council in 1942 unanimously passed a motion calling for, I quote, the removal of the enemy alien population from the Pacific coast to central parts of Canada, specifically anyone of Japanese descent, without any consideration for place of birth or citizenship. And whereas these residents of Japanese descent were unable to return to the city of Vancouver until April 1st, 1949, 4 years after the end of World War II. And whereas the year 2013 marks the 25th anniversary of the signing of the historic Japanese-Canadian Redress Agreement with the Government of Canada, and 1 year since the province of BC's apology for its complicity and support of the internment. And whereas the year 2013 also marks 1 year since the University of British Columbia's recognition of and granting of honorary degrees to students of Japanese descent who were forced to leave their UBC studies in 1942. And whereas since 2010, the City of Vancouver has been working with Canadians of Japanese descent to preserve the history of the internment for future generations. And whereas on October the 5th, 2010, the City of Vancouver joined the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, thereby committing to taking action to combat racism and discrimination. And whereas June the 21st, 2013 to June the 20th, 2014 has been proclaimed the Year of Reconciliation in the City of Vancouver in an ongoing effort to heal deep historical wounds and build new relationships that bring all cultures and communities together based on mutual respect, dignity, and hope. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Vancouver does hereby take full responsibility for its actions. With humility and respect, the City of Vancouver formally apologizes for its complicity, its inaction, and for failing to protect her residents of Japanese descent. And be it further resolved that the City of Vancouver pledges to do all it can to ensure that such injustices will not happen again to any of its residents, thereby upholding the principles of human rights, justice, and equality now and in the future. And that is the formal motion, which I will Look forward to having full unanimous support from council. I do want to again thank the elders who are here from the Japanese Canadian community for all of your advocacy, for all of your fortitude and tenacity, and ensuring that those of us who carry on and make these decisions and govern our city, our province, and our country benefit from your wisdom and ensure that these types of tragedies do not happen again in our communities. I want to thank Councillor Kerry Jang for his hard work with the community, with the Japanese Canadian community. He has been a lead on council on this front and done great work to ensure we take this action, and I know he has words to share with everyone. So with that, well, thank you again for being here, and we look forward to a brighter future altogether. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Jang, would you like to say a few words?
I know we're in committee and we don't normally stand, but I think it's important. A long time ago, certainly as a child, before video games and all that type of stuff, we used to go to model airplanes and we used to study history books and read about the great battles of the First World War, Second World War, Napoleon and his armies and all that kind of stuff. It was great reading, great fun. And I always thought I understood history. And certainly, being Chinese in Vancouver, it made certain sense to me why some of my relatives didn't really like Japanese people. I couldn't understand why, but they didn't. And when you think about it, at that time, my relatives here in Vancouver, Imperial Japan was at war with China, and so of course they remember all that. And soon thereafter, Imperial Japan was at war with the British Empire, of which we are part of at the time. So we heard stories about the fall of Malaya, Hong Kong, the sinking of HMS Prince of Wales and the Repulse and all that kind of stuff. And it all seemed to make simple sense that everybody should be suspect. However, as I was growing up too, I learned about the complexity of the internment from a story my father told me. And in 1941, my dad was a junior high school student at Templeton High School here in Vancouver. And Pearl Harbor had just occurred, and he was out in the schoolyard with his buddies. He went to the schoolyard to meet his buddies. And when he got there, he found a bunch of kids beating up a Japanese kid and calling him a dirty Jap. And they were beating on this kid. And so my dad went, uh-oh. And they turned around, looked at my dad, and they're about to turn on him. And my dad goes, uh-oh, what do I do? Then all of a sudden, one of the kids went up to my dad, and he said, put his arm around him, and he said, hey, don't worry, you're on our side. And my dad says, what do you mean? You're Chinese. You're on our side. They didn't know my dad's name. They just called him Chine all the time. Hey, Chine, don't worry about it. You're on our side. So my dad asked, what the heck did that Japanese kid do to you? And the answer he got was, that kid is the enemy now. It did not matter that the Japanese kid was a Canadian. It did not matter that they all grew up together. It did not matter that they were loyal. It did not matter that many of the Japanese fought in the First World War for the crown. It didn't matter. And in 1942, it did not matter to Vancouver City Council either. It was Vancouver City Council, through their motion in 1942, that dehumanized Japanese Canadians by calling them aliens, and to make matters worse, called them enemy aliens, as if there were something wrong. Well, 25 years ago, the federal government made amends. Now, you would have thought that with that, people would have learned something. And I'm going to speak now for some real personal experience. Now, let's fast forward to now. 68 years later, in the year 2010, the year of the Olympics, countries coming together, brotherhood and love and all that kind of stuff. But there was a comment made by a guy named Richard Fadden, who was the head of the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service, or CSIS. And in an interview to the CBC, he said that CSIS had evidence that certain municipal councillors had friendly relations with the People's Republic of China. And at that moment, which was astounding to me, was that all of a sudden, I was suspect. In fact, any municipal councillor of Chinese descent was suspect, and my inbox started to fill up with hate mail. asking me to resign, step down, declare my loyalty to Canada, and all that kind of stuff. And it just didn't affect me. It affected Councillor Louie, at that time Councillor George Chow, and my colleagues in Burnaby, Ann Kang, Richard Wang, Chagao in Richmond, Richard Chang, also from Burnaby. We all fell under suspicion and received the same kind of treatment. So really, in many ways, nothing had changed. And that was absolutely mind-boggling to me. So I'm saying with this apology motion, we as a city, in the spirit of reconciliation, join with the other levels of government to, and UBC, to right the past wrongs and to do everything we can so this won't happen again, no matter what color you are or what heritage you are. It's got to end now. You just can't paint everybody with the same brush. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jang, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, for those opening words, and of course, very important words for us as a city. We have a number of speakers today that have come to give us their stories, some information for us to consider before we vote on this, but I expect that it will be a unanimous vote of council, but certainly very welcome to everyone that's come today to be part of this. Our first speaker is Judy Hanazawa. Welcome.
You can hear me. Thank you, Councillor Louie, and thank you, Mayor Robertson, councillors for the City of Vancouver. I extend warm greetings to our Japanese Canadian seniors and others who are here to listen and witness the proceedings of this apology motion. I'm also acknowledging that we are conducting this matter on the traditional territory of the Squamish, the Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Thank you for allowing this to take place. My name is Judy Hanazawa, and I'm the chair of the Greater Vancouver Japanese Canadian Citizens Association Human Rights Committee. It's a long title. My presentation is to provide information about the 1942 detention of Japanese Canadians in Hastings Park and its relevance to today's historic apology motion. First of all, I express sincere thanks to the city for making this apology motion. I feel grateful and proud of the hard work and say thank you to our apology working group for Mary Kitagawa, Tosh Kitagawa, Vivian Ringstad, Lorene Oikawa, and Grace Thompson. I also express my gratitude to the city for the support given to our Japanese Canadian Hastings Park project. I appreciate the motion referring to our mutual work to preserve the history of the Japanese Canadian internment. And from 2010 through more than a few meetings, we received valuable guidance and support from Dave Hutch, planner of the Hastings Park Redevelopment Project, Councillor Carrie Jang, past Councillor Ellen Woodsworth, and also Councillor Raymond Louie. Thank you, Raymond. By December 1st, 2012, with the support of the city, the PNE, Parks Canada, and the Vancouver Heritage Foundation, we were able to unveil the 2 plaques in Hastings Park commemorating the detention and internment of Japanese Canadians. And today, again, with the city's support, the National Nikkei Museum is preparing an interpretive signage exhibit for the remaining Hastings Park detention buildings. And I'm going on into the past, about the Hastings Park of 1942. Life in Hastings Park is reflected in descriptions of tables made of rough sawn boards, using tin plates, living in animal stalls, straw tick mattresses, and army blankets. Separated families, fathers and sons over 13 shipped off to road camps. Seniors, mothers, girls, and younger boys remaining until their dispersal to internment sites. Anne Gomer Tsunohara wrote in The Politics of Racism, men had no choice but to abandon their dependence to the chaos of Hastings Park, ignorant of whether they would ever see them again. A hospital unit located in the poultry section of the livestock building, segregation between male and female patients, young children, as well as patients suffering from tuberculosis, some detainees with tuberculosis staying beyond 1942, and some not surviving. Food provided by an outside supplier, dysentery, diarrhea among detainees, a food strike on April 27th. School